Story 1. Abandoned by my father, I lost my home to my cunning stepmother and her spoiled daughter. But karma spared no one. My absent father and cunning stepmother plotted to snatch my home away to favor my spoiled, pregnant stepsister. But karma delivered a ruthless reckoning. Recently learning how much I, M34, make, my dad, M62, has become miserably self-centered, generally absent. Unbelievably, he chose to evict me from my own house, all in the name of family. My stepsister Ash, F29, who can do no wrong, has miraculously become pregnant. She struggles to find a place to stay, as her highly self-reliant aspirations are to be an escort and an OnlyFans model. Now Dad wants everything fixed, and I am supposed to be the fixer. I regretfully had to part with my house and hard-earned money to this woman, since she made all the wrong decisions. The man my dad openly dismissed as a duty several times is me. Ever since he learned about my new residence, job, and shockingly low income, though, he has become somewhat sensitive about our shared blood. Although I'm not thrilled with him constantly reminding me who my father is, he also wants me to deepen my ties with his wife and her daughter. She is my dad's child as well, but I was banished far too early to establish any kind of relationship with her. Honestly, I'm glad I didn't, since I would have been somewhat let down. I simply want to remind everyone before you all start that I'm here to let out my feelings. I have ideas, opinions, and sentiments to share. Though you may disagree and they might not sound good to you, I'm telling you anyway because, to be honest, I have no one else to tell. Now let me introduce my half-sister Ash, short for Ashlyn. She is literally making our dad proud. She is about 5 years younger than I am. Dad is delusional, as this woman is out there only serving as an escort, sleeping with a bunch of OnlyFans clients, and my father calls her his pride. Yes, you read that correctly. I suppose he's not familiar with the reality of the situation. Someone needs to tell him. Though I'm not too conservative, I try to focus on my morals and profession. When I have time to get to know someone better, I court women. Sometimes there's a spark, but other factors also play a role, like the long distance and availability problems. Other times, there is absolutely no connection. I try not to spend random nights sleeping with just anyone. I believe I should wait for the right woman. I get sick looking at a long list of partners, guys bragging about it like a medal is repulsive. I'm not sure why, but that's how I live my life. Unfortunately, my sister holds the opposite view. She certainly no longer counts her physical partners. She is now an escort, which personally repels me. Moreover, it's quite harmful as well. Certain clients expect odd and degrading activities from escorts. I have no idea how anyone would see working like that as acceptable. She posts indecent videos and pictures of herself online to profit from it. But she finds little success there. She probably doesn't know how to generate traffic, but for whatever reason, it's a flop. Here's the edited and polished version of your next passage, keeping your voice clear and consistent. From what sources am I aware of this? Here's an awkward story. A friend of mine mentioned it to me. After meeting for drinks once, Ash texted him asking if he wanted to have some fun. When I heard the story, I was already a bit uneasy when the man left with my sister. But he said he only realized she was my sister afterward. He told me she had emailed him the URL to her page, and he even showed it to me. I'm not sure if he's telling the truth. She breaks down constantly and begs Dad for money, so I believe she's not doing well. I never told Dad either. I couldn't even bring myself to confront her about it directly. One time I saw her answer a call while sitting in a car with an older man. He left her flowers and then drove away. She would sneak back into the house at strange hours through the window. This became clear to me when I came home over holidays from college. Though I don't know if she's still doing this, I don't want to be involved in any of it. I'm glad to have a respectable job. I haven't lived much with the new family since Dad was disturbed enough to send me away at any chance he got. but I've seen Ash enough to say she follows in her mother, Marissa's footsteps. F58. Marissa once thought she was a real icon in her heyday. She was very beautiful to men like my dad and used to be a flight attendant. If you know what I mean, she's now a regular botch-faced Karen. She runs a neighborhood daycare and has hands like claws, with nails longer than her lipstick. It's odd how parents would leave their children with someone like that. She could poke a child's eye out with those nails. She's as sharp as her nails, always stirring trouble in other people's lives and opinions about everything. She has more plastic in her body than the sea, and a truly terrible voice. She's as fake as phony leather. She's a bad influence on Dad. She didn't want to raise a child that wasn't hers, which I think was a big factor in Dad not thinking twice about sending me away to boarding school for 8 years. Now let me introduce you to my dad. Actually, he is the main cause of all this. Having lived a full life, he believes anything he does is justified, even when it's far from it, because he thinks he understands better. He regrets having me because I'm not like him. Thank God I'm not. My mother was a formidable woman. She looked after Dad well and clearly knew her priorities, yet they clashed. I should never forget that she used to tell me Dad was just a different person, not a horrible one. He will always be my dad, regardless of what happens. She was a good person and didn't want to poison my views against my father. He was definitely as intolerable to her as he is now. A few months later, they split and divorced. I was 4 years old at the time. 2 months after the divorce, Dad married Marissa. When I was 5, they had Ash. Later, my mother passed away in a car accident. She was coming to pick me up from school, so I can't forget that. She had always been on time. She was only late by 10 minutes once. Though it felt like an hour to me, it was only 10 minutes. A drunk driver hit her at a crossroads. He survived, she did not. A few years ago, he got a DUI, and I was left alone permanently. I waited at school. It took them 2 hours to come pick me up. Dad had come, so I was confused and misled. His irritation when he turned to the dead-faced Marissa and asked what they should do about me will never fade. She answered, "Your kid, your problem." Specifically, Dad. You can't just come to me now and expect me to look after your spoiled child. At last, I have steady work and oversee some side enterprises. Since I was 15, I've been earning and working quite hard. I started boarding school, then moved on to college, only visiting home during holidays, so I've been living alone for 8 years. I recently bought a property after working very hard to get where I am. It's a wonderful, modest house, far better than the apartment I used to share with friends. I honestly thought I'd never reach this life goal. Actually, I just moved in last month. Although I might not like my family much, basic politeness meant involving them in such a significant moment, so I invited them to my housewarming. Watching Dad's reaction was quite depressing, as he asked about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer. He seemed jealous, or to be honest, a bit annoyed. When I gave him what I thought was sufficient information, he responded with taunts like, "I wouldn't know. You never bothered to tell me." He was trying to get attention and clearly show our weak connection in front of friends and business associates, including my boss. A week later, he called me. I had a complex job to oversee at work, but I accepted because he said it was urgent. When I got home, Marissa and Puffy, red-eyed Ash, were glaring at me from the living room, so I avoided Ash. Dad was in the kitchen pulling beers from the fridge. He offered me one, but I graciously declined, fearing what he might say. When I asked what he wanted from me, he furrowed his eyebrows and replied with a question. Had I recently started complaining about us? Not sure what he meant, I scowled in confusion. He invited me to hang out in the living room with Ash and Marissa. I nodded and settled on the couch across from them. Ash folded her arms, Marissa rolled her eyes. Dad came in and sat facing me. Leaving his beer bottle on the coffee table, he leaned back and asked if I was blind. There was a pause, probably confusion on my end and anger on theirs. Before I could respond, He said I either chose not to notice things that should be obvious or I was blind. He claimed I'd likely become somewhat proud ever since buying the property and was avoiding looking at the people who really mattered to me. I groaned and asked what he meant, wanting him to be more explicit. He blew out a sarcastic breath and said I wasn't bothered by the dire circumstances in the room. He accused me of electing not to offer any help and choosing not to notice that the family was in trouble. I asked him what risk he meant. Glancing at Ash, who rolled her eyes, he said she was pregnant. Like anyone else, I wanted to congratulate her, but she started crying before I could. Marissa hugged her and told me to be concerned enough to find out what was happening at home. Dad said Ash had recently discovered she was pregnant, and the guy who caused it had broken up with her. Marissa also mentioned that Ash had decided to keep the baby, so our future decisions should be based on that. Can she afford it? All I could say. Ash and Marissa stared at me like I'd said something wrong. To be honest, I meant well. I was worried. I was actually ready to help her, but in my mind I imagined they wanted me to contribute financially. Dad then got up and moved over to sit beside me. "That's why I called you," he said afterward. He added that maybe my mother neglected to teach me how to be a good brother, but brothers would throw their lives away for the comfort of their sisters. He said he's a good parent to his daughter. I asked for his effing pardon. I'm not dying for her, but I know my financial input is required. I sighed and asked what action he wanted me to take. He said, "That's my good boy," grinned and rubbed my back. I forced a fake smile which vanished the instant Dad said, "You're giving Ashlyn your house." "No, I am not," Dad answered immediately. "Yes, that's what I said." Dad scowled and asked why not. I told him I could help with some cash, but the house is mine. Until she can afford it, I'm willing to let her share a room rent-free. Dad got up and said, "Nonsense." "Dad, it makes perfect sense to me." He insisted, nevertheless, that I not only offer her the house, but also move out and buy another one for myself. I argued that if Ash is unemployed and expecting a kid, she can't even afford to run the house or pay the bills. Dad informed me that those would also be my obligations. Apologized to me. Held to the no. Though I was enraged, I had to stay polite. I stood up and told him it wasn't feasible and that I was leaving. I turned to go. He wasn't done. 1 week later, he showed up at my place while I was at work. I'm not sure how he got in or where he got the keys, but when I came home, I saw men loading boxes filled with my belongings outside the house. I hurried inside and asked what they were doing. They said the homeowner had told them to throw the stuff out. I told them to stop and get my belongings back inside. That I owned the house. I lost my composure. Coming home, this was the last thing I expected to see. When I went inside to find Dad and Ash, they were still there, insisting I do what brothers ought to do. They ignored my demand that they leave, so I told them I would call the police. Finally, they left, bad-mouthing me and cursing. Though I know this is a lot to read, it was much worse in person. A week has passed, and I'm posting here because I feel horrible about it. Was I wrong? I feel like they need me and that I shouldn't cut them off like this. But I also believe my support has limits. Growing up, their disconnection and lack of concern infuriated me. Now they want me to lay down my life for them? It's a bit much, if that makes sense. Tell me what you think. I couldn't even get my friends involved in this. Right now, you're all I have. Sure. Here's a cleaned up and polished version of your update. Update. Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. I posted a week ago, and to be honest, I didn't expect it to get so much attention. As the comments came in, some of them made me question a lot of things. Not long after, I decided I didn't want to completely cut off my family. This change came when Ash called me. She told me she wanted to see me. She said she had a few things to tell me and asked if we could meet at my place. But since I was still uneasy about what happened last time, I suggested we meet somewhere else. We ended up at a coffee shop. At first, she seemed nervous. Unlike her usual self, which is usually quite conceited and unpleasant. She told me she had recently been dumped. I said I had an idea since Dad had mentioned the guy who got her pregnant had left her. She shook her head and said, Dad believes that, but the truth was different. Dad thinks her boyfriend left her because of commitment issues, but actually she is the one with the commitment problems. Unbelievable, right? She said she really loved this man, but he discovered some things about her just a few days before she told him she was pregnant. She confronted him first, which angered him because he wanted to bring it up himself. At that moment, he lost control and punched a hole in the wall. She said she was scared. Then he told her he was divorcing her and left without hearing her side of the story. She's been trying to call him nonstop, but he hardly responds. He's only texted her once, telling her to get rid of the child first and then inform him. Only then will he talk to her again, but she has to give up the baby to get that chance. Now, I know Ash is imperfect, but this guy, he really worries me. She said it felt strange to tell her brother about all this, and I shrugged, saying it was okay if she didn't want to tell me. Since I had already guessed she was talking about OnlyFans and escorting, she took a deep breath and let it out before I could ask what she really wanted to talk about. She admitted she had been involved in some questionable activities, though I secretly hoped she'd deny my suspicions. I was worried. She told me she wanted to be an artist and paint, but Marissa told her she wouldn't make a decent living that way. Marissa told her she needed to start looking for a man. Right now. At first, Ash was disgusted, but soon enough she started attracting attention from older men. She said when she told Marissa about this, Marissa said it was a good thing. That is, older men who actually make money and know how to handle it. At the time, Ash was just 19, and Marissa told her she wouldn't or couldn't have a decent, comfortable life through college alone. Ash had youth, and many would pay for that. She decided she wanted to be a model. She tried several modeling agencies, but none showed any real interest. Then she met a man in his 40s who claimed he could get her a job. He bought her expensive outfits and jewelry for events and drove her to various gatherings. She was happy until her first gig came up. It turned out she was selling her time to a man to pay for a modeling contract. She spent the evening thinking it would just be dinner. But that was it. She did get a small modeling contract afterward, shooting for a minor brand. A few more men took advantage of her while she hoped to land a real gig, but she was told they chose someone else. Then she realized the man investing in her was actually profiting from her. She was terrified he might have her killed, so she thought it foolish to confront him. She told him she was fine with low pay and no longer wanted to pursue modeling. Luckily, he let her leave without trouble. Afterward, she tried waiting tables in bars, but it was hard for her. Ash said that money was hard-earned, and Marissa made fun of her for doing those small jobs. Marissa would say women should be well taken care of, that women are the beauty of the world and should just shine and smile like showpieces. So Ash started going out with men just for dinner, but she charged for it. She said many lonely men simply wanted company, but too many turned into stalkers or obsessive types who thought they were owed more than what they paid for. She began escorting when she realized that just interacting with men and letting them feel close caused more trouble than actually sleeping with them. It worked well until a friend mentioned OnlyFans. She tried to start it but wasn't great at editing or handling the camera. She wasn't social enough either, so it didn't work out. It takes a lot of effort. Then she met her boyfriend, an ex-coworker who worked as a barista and came around often. Though clingy and possessive, she really liked him. He also didn't trust her, and given she was still on OnlyFans and escorting without him knowing, he had every reason to be suspicious. Her boyfriend started supporting her with the small income she made after quitting escorting and leaving OnlyFans completely. She seemed okay with this, but Marissa wasn't. Then Ash became pregnant, and her boyfriend found out everything. She said a few men on her list might be the father. All of them gave money to help her and the child. One even proposed, but she knows all of them believe they're the only one, which is silly since she's an escort. She doesn't tell any of them the truth directly. She pays her expenses and most likely supports the child. She said she told me all this because she couldn't tell Dad. Dad thinks she's only done some modeling here and there, makes little money, and had one man in her life who left her. Marissa mostly understands when he should have stayed. She advises Ash to marry the man who proposed and let him believe he's the father. Ash doesn't know what to tell Dad. She also doesn't want to let anyone believe a lie and doesn't want to marry the guy because he's weird and old. She said some financial support would be great, and she wanted me to make up with Dad. I asked what she wanted me to help with. She said I should agree to whatever Dad asked and then spend some time away. I could come back when things were less tense. How was that a solution? I politely declined and said I could only provide some money, but I wasn't comfortable leaving my own place. She told me I lacked the decency to help her, that she'd exposed her whole life to me, and that I was selfish for thinking that way. She said even then, Dad was right about me, and I deserved to be sent to an orphanage instead of being taken in when I needed a home. She stood up and stormed out. I don't think my response was harsh, but was it selfish? What do you think her story says? Does it justify her expectations? Should I trust her? She seemed truthful, but does that mean I should follow her advice? Tell me, everyone. Update. Right now, this is what's picking at my brain. A few things have transpired after another week. I assumed I would hit the keys and notify you all about it. I appreciate your help on my earlier update, gentlemen. Having folks back up my ideas for once is rather relieving. Still, Dad called me once I met Ash. He wanted to meet with me at the pub to sort out a few things. Interested, I agreed and went to see him. He mentioned he knew how much I was making as we sat at the counter. When I questioned him about why it mattered, he stated he knew I could afford to buy another property in a few years. I shrugged and said I already had a house, so this conversation ought to be quite over. He maintained that since I didn't yet have a family, and that single women find it more difficult to raise a child, that child needed a safe place he could call home. I reminded Dad then that Ash had been living with them long enough and that nothing seemed to be an issue. A small child wouldn't cause harm. I also asked him what she would do. Pregnant, living alone in a big house. She needs to be surrounded by others so that she could be looked after, I remarked. Dad surprised me once again at that point. He said Marissa and he would move in with Ash into my house. My hearing let me realize something. The bartender laughed sarcastically before I could react to that. Dad objected and inquired about what he found so humorous. He said, Ash, she uses everyone, he remarked, then tosses them away. He nodded, declaring he was her lover, when my dad questioned him about who he was referring to. My eyes opened. So this was the man. Dad balled his fists and asked the man why he felt it was acceptable to establish a family he couldn't sustain. He spoke angrily. Holding his hands up, the man informed Dad he had no bearing on the family in question. He also showed no desire in rearing a child not of his own. Dad pushed him to say why he felt that. He grinned and explained that although Ash still got pregnant, he had a vasectomy last year since he didn't want any children. He also discovered her driving off with several males following her lies on her whereabouts. Then he learned she had an OnlyFans page. He found none of it believable. That was the last straw for him when Ash at last told him they were expecting. He couldn't have a child, hence it verified everything. Knowing this, he told Ash she had been cheating on him all along. She let the truth fly free. While my ears were focused on Dad's voice, all I could see was his face moving from wrath to disbelief to disappointment. He shrugged and informed us he owed Ash money, time, honesty, at least love. He owed nothing else. He stated he was unsure whether Dad knew any of it, but he knew no dad would be ashamed of a child like that. Dad stiffened his lip, got off the stool silently, and turned away. He texted me later that evening, saying he had to go get Marissa from her yoga session. I'm not sure what happened after that, but I'm sure it was something as Ash was at my door, sobbing the very following day. I wrecked everything, she informed me. To stifle a scene, I drew her inside and calmed her down. I told her I told Dad nothing. It was her boyfriend, the bartender Dad and I had visited. Then she told me Dad advised her to stay at home and stop everything. He claimed he never expected she would turn to such methods and felt disgusted by her. He advised her to pick a decent man and straighten her behavior. He also noted that these days her chances of meeting decent men were somewhat limited. I hugged her and listened to her. Dad had just returned from seeing me when he confronted her, so she stated she was sorry, believing it was me. I forgave her, then she returned home. She added that Marissa was really quiet when Dad was discussing wonderful women and their loyalty, like she couldn't say anything, while she was raging and telling me how terrible she felt. Ash stated it's among the topics Marissa avoids talking about. She answered that Marissa couldn't have an opinion since she is into yoga, so I asked her what she meant by that. I could only grimace in perplexity before Ash carried on crying as she related what else had transpired. Yoga, said Hum, stayed with me. Actually, what do you suppose happened? Will Ash still be Dad's pride source? Nobody has approached me ever since. Still, I will see and let you all know. I know y'all probably didn't expect me to get back to you so soon, but I couldn't help it. Update: 2 days after my last upload, and I am here for those inquiring. Although Ash's ex's name is not important, we may call him Bob. This is the fresh bit. I saw Dad the day before yesterday. I informed him I had made some decisions. I said I was ready to let Ash use a room and I wanted to assist in raising her child. I would be fine paying for diapers and other supplies, but she needs to start working right away. Dad informed me then that nobody would be with the kid, hence I advised her to attempt working from home or freelancing. This time Dad wasn't his usual nasty self. He stopped and then let out a sigh. Telling me he felt I despised him, he settled on the couch. He was correct, but I probed him about his reasoning. Mom despised him too, he said, which was why. She never said that, I told him quickly. Instead, she constantly stated Dad loved me and worried about me. I told him the only reason I felt let down at all was how inaccurate my view of Dad was. Mom told me all that. Then from Dad, I sensed only absolute neglect and lack of caring. Rubbing his eyes, he confided in me he loathed himself in many ways. He stated he liked Mom, but they hadn't known each other well enough to determine whether they were really each other's type. He sighed and added he had to marry her since he got her pregnant. Though he never felt the spark between them, she was a good wife to him. He next crossed paths with Marissa. I could feel my insides tingling at that. I remained motionless. None of this was known to me. Dad told me Marissa sparked a flame in him he never knew he possessed. He caught emotions before he knew it. He was quite delighted with her. Marissa became pregnant too before he could negotiate his way through rights and obligations. She was pregnant, therefore it was too late even if he informed her it was bad. He urged her to wait. He wanted to tell Mom first, but Marissa came to our house feeling nervous. She reported everything to Mom. Dad took it when Mom challenged him. Mom was really hurt in this quite unpleasant episode. Yet even then she remained courteous and requested Dad for a divorce. My parents separated. Y'all, Dad had an affair with my stepmom and got her pregnant. I'm not sure just how much worse this dude could be. Dad stopped and glanced across at me. He stated he had to return me home after spending a good year with Marissa when Mom passed away. Marissa despised every aspect of it. Again, driven by guilt or something, she was worried that Dad could put me before their kids somehow. 3 years later, he sent me off to boarding school, and subsequently, I never had to remain home long enough to cause Marissa any trouble. Love makes you do stupid things, he remarked. And I wanted to punch this man in the face, but I restrained myself. Turning back, I found Marissa standing in the gateway, carrying a water bottle. She claimed to be just heading to yoga class. Setting her bottle on the table, she headed into the kitchen. I blinked, then she was back and was through the door before I could think clearly. Numb, I followed her out. I grabbed her water bottle to give back to her. She had already gotten her car and was leaving when I came out. To help me relax, I silently sat in my car and gently drove after her. She pulled out from parking outside a yoga club. She turned to glance around her and then began down an alley. She once more turned around and climbed into another car. She kissed and hugged the driver and they headed off. I was hardly able to blink. I locked my jaw, parked, got out, and entered the yoga club. When I asked them about Marissa checking in, they denied providing personal information. I insisted I be at least told if she were there, saying I was frightened about her. They informed me they had no customers under that name. I returned to my car and waited. I have no idea what came over me, but I started filming when the second car rolled in. Then slapped her butt as she happily headed to the parking lot when a man got out, opened her door for her, hugged her, and kissed her. For yoga, Marissa, so much is different. I left before she arrived at the parking lot. My dad cheated on my mother, thus he is currently being cheated on as well. Karma is. Dad has phoned me several times, but I didn't answer. All I want right now is to go and question Marissa about it, so I'm going to see what happens. Should I change? Hello, y'all. I believe this to be most likely the last update, and I know it's a week late. Y'all anticipated it to be sooner, but so much occurred this week. I first managed to man up and approach Marissa. I went when Ash was asleep and Dad was not home. Was she scheduled for yoga that day? She claimed to have it every day, Sundays included. Having spaghetti in the kitchen, I asked her, who was her yoga teacher? She chose a name at random. Was that a guy? I asked her. Saying no, she chuckled and asked, why would I take a boy? She had a female instructor at the club she visited, so I told her it was odd since none of the other clubs had female instructors. She corrected me, but her voice startled me, and her hands were no longer swirling the pasta sauce. They told me I had joined the club yesterday. I told her that. How could I know where her club was? She asked. I informed her I visited last time following her. She let go of a spoon. I grabbed it, and she spun around. What are you getting at? She asked. I then informed her what I observed. She disputed it, as was natural. I mentioned I saw it with my own eyes. She shrugged and said Dad would never accept me. At least he would believe his own eyes, I told her after pulling out my phone and running through the footage. She stood stunned and spent a minute not speaking. Her face then relaxed, and she carried on cooking noodles. She stated it was useless now. She was already preparing for a divorce anyhow. My eyes grew wide. This woman was horrible. My dad deserved all of it, granted. But oh, she's a serpent. She informed me that her sweetheart of 3 years ago is the man she visits at the club. When it was safe to do so, they resurrected their passion. She stated they had fallen in love long ago, but at the time he was wed to another woman whose father had employed him for his business. Though there was a lot at risk, Marissa and her boyfriend decided he should keep his marriage intact and handle his money. He would then split from his wife and live with Marissa. But Marissa became pregnant, and as women should, she was trying to pin a man down for support. She made that decision to hang around Dad. They were seeing one another on and off, but Marissa chose Dad and told him he had to act when she met her boyfriend and got pregnant. She had to handle things herself since he developed cold feet, and that's when she spoke with Mom. She's good right now. Her partner is a widower and has a business. She said, women should do what they can, kid, and turned around smiling. Her smile stopped, though, as she peered over my shoulder. The next instant, her smile vanished. I turned back to see Dad in the gateway with flaming eyes and clenched hands. He was shaking. Dad awakened Ash then and carried her to the kitchen. Who was her father? He asked. She shook her head and glanced across at Marissa. She assured him she always recognized him to be her dad. Thus, she didn't give blood any thought. Pacing the floor, he ran his fingers through his hair. Marissa and Ash were instructed to leave his house 2 days later. The divorce is underway. At a shelter are Ash and Marissa. Dad has requested me to locate him a therapist, and he has been rather quiet since. I pardon him every single time. Regarding Marissa, her boyfriend didn't bring her in. He disputes having ever spoken with her. Marissa has begged me for the proof. I have it. She even begged me to consider Ash through her pregnancy. And what can I say, Marissa? Your child, your challenge. From what standpoint should I act? Either destroy the footage or hand it up. I'll let others know in the comments soon later. I appreciate you joining me and for your ideas and encouragement. It means a great deal. Story 2. My stepmom framed me to steal my inheritance. Dad didn't believe me until 7 years later. When I was 21, my stepmother falsely accused me of assault to prevent me from inheriting my father's wealth. My dad believed her and cut me off. 7 years later, he discovered the truth. Hello, everyone. My biological parents divorced when I was 9, and they shared equal custody of me. I spent weekdays with my mom, who lived near my school, and weekends with my dad. Despite their separation, both parents were always kind and gentle towards me. While I was sad they were not together, I understood they both loved me deeply. A few years later, my dad met Gina, who would become my stepmother. When I was 11, my dad introduced her to me. She seemed nice, and my dad was clearly happy. He hoped we would get along well. Gina had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, who were 14 at the time. Raised without their father, the twins were quite immature and would throw public tantrums if they didn't get their way. As an introvert, I quietly observed their behavior. After a year of dating, my dad and Gina decided to marry when I was 12. Even my mom attended the wedding. I was excited to have a new family member. Initially, I thought my stepmother and I got along well. However, a few months after their honeymoon, she told me one morning that she didn't really like me. She said we needed to pretend to get along for my dad's sake when he was around. She also told me to stay out of her way when he wasn't there because she couldn't stand the sight of me, as I reminded her of my mom. Hearing her harsh words broke my heart. I had genuinely liked her and hoped for a good relationship. The twins overheard her and later teased me, saying my dad didn't love me and preferred them. I remember crying and telling my mom about it. She immediately called my dad and gave him an earful. My dad assured her that my stepmom would never say such things and that I must have misunderstood her. The following weekend, when I visited my father, my stepmother appeared upset. She stayed silent in front of my dad. But as soon as he left, she angrily whispered to me, threatening that she would ensure I no longer had a dad in my life if I ever told my mom anything about her. She also warned that she would divorce my dad and take all his money, leaving him destitute if I didn't keep quiet. At just 12 years old, I was terrified for my dad, so I nodded in agreement. From that day on, Gina made it her mission to make my life miserable in every way possible. Being a child, I felt I had to endure it silently. Whenever we were alone, she would say hurtful things to me, and I would stay silent, hoping she would eventually stop bullying me. She would insult my height and weight, calling me ugly. I hoped my dad would notice, but he never did. He believed Gina and I had a good relationship and would often force me to go shopping and eat out with her and the kids. She would use my dad's card to pay for our meals, but wouldn't let me eat anything substantial at the restaurant. I was only allowed to have soup or dessert, no main course. I would sit there miserably, watching them finish their meals while crying quietly. I would return home hungry, and she would force me to go to bed without eating. Many nights I cried myself to sleep, both hungry and exhausted from her cruelty. At that point, I was at my wit's end, scared, angry, and frustrated with both my stepmom and my dad. This is why I dreaded visiting my dad on weekends. Every Friday evening, I would try to avoid visiting by coming up with excuses like a stomachache so I could stay with my mom. My parents started noticing, and my dad would call, expressing sadness at not seeing me. My mom would urge me to tell her if something was wrong, but I always kept quiet, still scared of Gina's threats. When I was 14, my dad decided to take the whole family, including me, on a trip to Greece. Initially, I didn't want to go, but my mother told me it was a good opportunity to travel and see the world, so I reluctantly agreed to join them. As usual, Gina pretended to be sweet and kind in front of my dad, asking about school as if she genuinely cared. I noticed she would subtly tease me in her sweet voice, making hurtful comments that wouldn't outright portray her as mean. For example, whenever I mentioned playing basketball, she would joke that I needed to be taller for that sport, even though I was quite tall for my age. She would then say I should focus more on my studies if I ever wanted to be successful. The twins would smirk and call me names like meathead, even though I had better grades than them. My dad would notice but choose to ignore it. Whenever I expressed that her comments hurt me, my dad insisted she was just teasing and that I should lighten up. Gina would nod and tell my dad that I had no sense of humor and needed to learn to have fun. This continued throughout the vacation. One day, in a moment of anger, when she and the twins were teasing me about my weight while I was trying to enjoy the pool, I decided to retaliate. I told the twins that their double chins were embarrassing, watching their faces fall. I then turned to Gina and told her she shouldn't wear a shrug over her bikini because her huge stomach was still visible, making her look like a penguin. Gina's face turned red with embarrassment, and she ran back to the hotel room. The twins started yelling at me, calling me sexist and saying how horrible it was for me to say such things about them. Later, my dad confronted me, clearly angry. He asked if I had really spoken to my stepmother and stepsisters like that. And when I admitted it, he lectured me about how he had raised me better and that I should never talk to a woman about her weight. I argued back that they were criticizing my weight, looks, and height, but my dad forced me to apologize to Gina, who had locked herself in the bathroom crying after what I said. Gina and the twins made a big show of accepting my apologies. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She spoke to my dad, who tried to blame me for the whole situation. My mother threatened to call CPS on him if Gina ever commented on my weight or looks again. This scared my dad, and after that, Gina never said anything to me. However, she and the twins would blatantly ignore me whenever my dad wasn't around, which I honestly didn't mind. When I was 16, my mom went away for a few days, so I stayed with my dad and Gina. Gina complained about having to cook for one more person, so on my last night, I decided to make dinner since my mom had taught me to cook from a young age to be independent. Gina wanted to invite some friends over when she heard I was cooking. I prepared the meal, set the table, and served dinner. Everyone loved the food and praised me. My dad decided to do the dishes, so I went to my room. From there, I heard Gina and her friends talking loudly outside my window. Her friends were saying how lucky she was to have a nice husband and a great house. When they mentioned how nice it was that I cooked for them, Gina went on a rant about how annoying I was and that she couldn't stand seeing my face. She told her friends she couldn't wait until I was 18 so she wouldn't have to see me every weekend. When one of her friends mentioned again how nice I seemed, Gina admitted she had hoped I would fail at cooking so she could blame me for something. This shocked me because I was trying to be polite to her, even though I knew she hated me. As time went on, Gina's dislike for me only grew. During college, when I visited my dad for a few days at his insistence, Gina would completely ignore me. She would schedule family activities with just dad and the twins, or her and the twins. Leaving me at home, if I woke up late during my vacation, she would yell at me, calling me lazy and inconsiderate, even though I always cleaned up after myself. I knew I was always respectful to her because my dad would be furious if I wasn't. Despite being polite and careful not to upset her, it felt like nothing I did was ever enough. She was also inconsiderate of my privacy. She would loudly enter my room while I was sleeping, waking me up or barging in without knocking, making me extremely uncomfortable. She would randomly search my room and look under my bed for reasons unknown to me. She refused to pick up dinner for me, but did so for the family, never inviting me to join them. Despite this, I kept quiet, tried to stay out of the way, and spent time with Dad whenever possible. Now on to the main incident. My eyes widened in shock, and the blood drained from my face upon hearing such a serious accusation. My dad looked utterly confused and concerned, his eyes darting between me and Gina, clearly at a loss for words. Gina continued her story, claiming she had suffered in silence for years, afraid to speak up for the sake of the family. I yelled at Gina, calling her a psycho, insisting there was no way I had ever looked at her inappropriately, let alone touched her. Gina yelled back that she was done keeping her silence and needed to expose a monster like me. The twins began shouting furiously at me, accusing me of putting their mother through this and using words like rapist and molester. When I turned 21, my dad invited me to visit him, saying he had some important news to share. It had been a while since I last visited, so I felt a bit apprehensive, but my mother encouraged me, saying it was good news. I agreed and booked my tickets. Upon arrival, my dad greeted me warmly at the airport, and we drove back to his place. I asked him about the news, but he said he would reveal everything during the family dinner. When we arrived, I noticed the twins were home too. It had been a while since I had seen Emma and Emily. They didn't acknowledge my presence, and I didn't acknowledge theirs either. That night during dinner, my dad started by expressing how proud he was to have three wonderful children. He spoke about his gratitude for having such a loving family and wanted to share some exciting news. The atmosphere was positive, and I felt a sense of anticipation as he continued speaking. He looked at each of us with a smile, including Gina, who had been giving me icy glares all day. My dad went on to say that he had recently lost a friend to a heart attack, which made him realize how lucky he was to have us. He had spoken to a lawyer and made a will. Upon hearing the word will, Gina and the twins perked up with excitement. Dad said he had decided to leave the house to my stepmom, as she was his wife. Gina beamed with pride and kissed him on the cheek. My dad's house was a 5-bedroom place, and if Gina ever decided to sell it, she could make a fortune. Dad then announced he was leaving his entire retirement account and his car to me. This wasn't just any car. It was a vintage car he had spent a lot of time and money maintaining. The car held sentimental value for both of us, as he often shared stories of his youth and adventures associated with it. As I processed this information, I realized that leaving the car to me was his way of expressing his love. As my dad spoke about his pride in me inheriting the car, Gina's expression shifted from pride to discontent. She exchanged glances with the twins, who seemed equally displeased. It was clear that the idea of me inheriting a significant sum of money and the beloved vintage car stoked their resentment. Dad, apparently unaware of the tension in the room, continued to explain how he would leave the joint bank account he shared with Gina to the twins. Since Gina was a homemaker, the money was entirely my dad's. He expressed his wish for the account to be equally divided between them, assuring them they would have money and a house to live in, so they needn't worry if anything happened to him. I thought this arrangement was fair and had no issues with it. However, the twins immediately voiced their disappointment, saying they had expected more. They argued that my dad should also leave them his retirement account, claiming I didn't need it anyway. When my dad questioned their reasoning, Gina chimed in, stating that as a guy, I should find my own way, whereas they were women and needed more money for financial security. My dad reminded Gina that he had already taken care of their college funds, and now they were also getting a house and a bank account, so they had nothing to worry about. Despite this, Gina kept insisting that I didn't deserve so much money. My dad firmly reiterated that his decision was final. I sat quietly, observing as the argument escalated. Suddenly, Gina burst into tears. We looked at her, startled, and my dad reassured her that there was no need to cry since he had divided everything fairly. Through her sobs, Gina claimed she had kept silent for years to protect the family, but couldn't hold it in any longer. The room fell into awkward silence, and my dad and I exchanged confused looks. Despite the palpable tension, He gently encouraged Gina to share what was weighing on her mind. Amidst her sobs, Gina began to recount how, a few years ago, I had supposedly tried to force myself on her, but she had kept it hidden to protect me. I was stunned, completely blindsided by the unexpected accusation. Before I could even grasp what was happening, Gina started elaborating on her fabricated story. She told my dad that after our vacation in Greece, where we had an argument about weight and height, I would constantly stare at her and attempt to enter her bedroom uninvited. I sat frozen in my chair as she continued to concoct tales of how I would try to barge in every time she took a shower or get uncomfortably close to her face when we were alone. She claimed she dreaded having me over every weekend because she feared I would behave the same way with the twins. I tried to defend myself, vehemently denying the baseless accusations and yelling at her for having the audacity to make up such lies. But Gina continued to cry as if she were the victim. She went on about how, as I grew older, I made her increasingly uncomfortable, and on one occasion when we were alone, I allegedly tried to force myself on her. My head was spinning, and it all felt like a terrible nightmare. I couldn't believe how a pleasant evening had spiraled into such wild accusations. I looked to my dad for support, but he stayed silent, clearly trying to process everything Gina had just said. He asked her if what she claimed was true, and Gina nodded confidently, insisting she would never lie to him about his own son. As his wife, she said, he should believe her. While I tried to defend myself, my dad asked Gina why she hadn't spoken up sooner. She explained that she was afraid no one would believe her since I was a minor, supposedly trying to do inappropriate things with her. As his stepmother, she felt people would dismiss her words. She claimed she had to suffer in silence to protect the family. By that point, I was crying, begging my dad not to believe her. I never imagined Gina could invent such horrible lies, especially after everything she had already put me through over the years. Unfortunately, her manipulation had severely strained my relationship with my dad, who now seemed torn between trusting me and believing his wife. The twins, influenced by their mother's story, sided with Gina and shouted at me to leave their house. I yelled back that it was my dad's home and they shouldn't believe their mother's lies. Amidst the chaos, my dad looked at me and told me to leave until the matter was resolved. It felt like a punch to the gut. Being rejected by my own father, who chose to believe his second wife over me, left me hurt, confused, and betrayed. I packed my things and left the home I once thought was mine. I flew straight to my mother, who was shocked to see me at her doorstep. When I told her everything, she was furious and ready to confront Gina. But I begged her not to, knowing how unpredictable and dangerous Gina could be. If Gina could make up such wild lies just to get me kicked out because she was upset about the inheritance, she was capable of much worse. I couldn't risk having her in my life anymore. That's when I decided to cut off my dad permanently. Since he chose to believe her, he didn't deserve me in his life. Later, my mom told me that my dad had called her, ashamed of having a son like me, and said he wanted nothing to do with me. Despite my mom's attempts to defend me, it was all in vain. My dad's side of the family, convinced by Gina's story, also attacked my mom, accusing her of raising a pervert. I can't even imagine the pain my mom felt hearing those words about her own son. The damage was done. Gina had won. I wish I could say my life improved after cutting them off, but it didn't. Gina and the twins kept bombarding me with hateful texts, threatening me to stay away from my dad forever. It got so bad I had to change my number just to escape them. Even then, things didn't get better. Gina's actions left me terrified of being around any woman, scared I'd be falsely accused again and lose my job and career. I was afraid to meet anyone or go on dates. Throughout this nightmare, my mom stood by me and believed me. I suffered from severe depression and suicidal thoughts, and she flew in to live with me for a few months to make sure I was okay. Slowly, my mental health improved, and I started to rebuild my life. Eventually, I met a wonderful woman named Mara, who brought joy back into my world. She has completely changed my life, and my mom adores her. Mara and my mom mean everything to me, and thanks to them, I continue to live with purpose. Just a week ago, I got a call from an unknown number. Thinking it might be Amazon, I answered. To my shock, it was my dad. I was stunned to hear his voice after nearly 7 years. He sounded old. When I asked how he got my new number, he dodged the question and asked if I was doing okay. I stayed silent for a moment before telling him not to bother me again. I had nothing to say. That's when he broke down crying and begged for my forgiveness, admitting how wrong he was to abandon his own son. Curiosity got the better of me, so I waited for him to explain. He revealed that Gina had been cheating on him with his best friend for years. When he confronted her with proof, she stopped hiding and confessed she was tired of being married to a pathetic man like him. Gina admitted she had only married him for his money and hated being with him. When pressed further, she confessed to fabricating all the accusations against me because she hated me and wanted all his wealth for herself and her daughters. As you can imagine, my dad divorced her, and she got nothing from the marriage due to her affair. Despite her lawyers fighting for alimony, my dad said he'd been waiting to finalize the divorce so he could officially reach out and apologize for what he put me through. He expressed a desire to make up for lost time and rebuild our father-son relationship.
Update 1. My post was locked earlier, but hopefully it's okay now. I've posted the link and tried my best with the formatting, though I'm on mobile. To everyone who offered support and advice, thank you so much. Your kind words helped me see things more clearly. I'm not just angry at my dad for believing my stepmother over me, but also for all those years she harassed me while he did nothing to protect me. I was just a child, and she manipulated and blackmailed me while I stayed silent. I think it's time I open up to my mom and let her know exactly what I went through, because I know she'll understand.
Update 3. Wow, it's been 6 months since I wrote this post, and I can't believe how much my life has changed. I want to share some happy news first. I proposed to Mara, and she said yes. My mom is thrilled for us, and we're thinking about moving closer to her because the schools are better there. Since we both work remotely, it makes sense for our future family. Thanks to advice from people on Reddit, I've also started therapy, and it's helping me feel better. Little by little, I'm trying to focus on the positive things in my life, like Mara and my mom. They've always been there for me, and I'm deeply grateful for their support. The past has been tough, but I'm looking forward to a brighter future, free from lies and drama. Update 2. Hi everyone. It's been a week since my last update. For those who've asked about my mental health, I'm doing okay. Thank you for your kindness. I booked tickets for my mom to come visit so I could tell her and Mara everything. They had already sensed something was wrong. I started by telling them about my dad contacting me after all these years, which shocked my mom. She asked why he reached out, and I explained everything. She had no idea he went through a divorce and was furious at Gina for what she put us all through. Then I told them about how Gina manipulated me when I was just 12 years old. I recounted how she bullied me when Dad wasn't around and threatened to divorce him if I ever told him. I didn't realize how traumatic those events were until I started opening up about them one by one. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Mara and my mom were quietly crying too. My mom immediately hugged me and kept saying I shouldn't have kept this inside and that it was okay to share. I cried for half an hour while she held me. Mara also said that no child should have to go through what I did, and that it's completely okay if I decide never to speak to my dad again because he should have protected me. My mom nodded, saying I don't owe my dad any explanations because when I needed him the most, he chose to believe his wife over me. The only reason he's reaching out now is because he's lonely and has no family left. That's when I realized they were right. Maybe my dad never really loved me, because if he did, he would never have believed I was capable of those things. Since then, I felt much lighter after sharing my past out loud with my mom and Mara. I've blocked my dad and will continue to block any family member who tries to interfere in my life. I owe no explanations to those who abandoned me.